I used to do lots of things.
I used to do things and I'd say things and Jesus I was evil. Take things and break things and Jesus I was evil.
All right, welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Reckless Musecast. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Garza.
And I'm Joe's co-host, Ben DeLesio.
All right, and then with us today is Alex Miceli. Alex, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so before we kind of dive into our topics, why don't you talk to the audience a little bit about what you do and kind of like the various realms that you work in?
So I am pretty eclectic in the things that I do. It's kind of why on the internet I call myself Alex of all trades. But I got started, for the most part, in writing fiction. So I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in creative writing fiction. And I write novels. I don't have any published, but yeah, I write novels and short stories. I've had some short stories published. I've had a play published. I've had some poetry published. I've won some awards for some of my work. And I also am like a gaming streamer on YouTube, and am a big advocate on against woke ideology for writers and against censorship by big tech and the government.
Which right before we signed on here, I was on Twitter like usual, and I saw in Canada they ceremoniously burned 30 books that are offensive to the Indigenous population. So I always say, when you start burning books, your culture is always headed in the right direction. So congratulations, Canada. I can't wait. Big things ahead. And I'm sure that very few, usually the case is that very few of the group that you're purporting to help, let's say here, the Indigenous population here, probably does not give a shit. Maybe a couple loud voices, but it's probably a bunch of white liberals who want to make themselves feel better about.
Well, it's a good like empty gesture to show your support of a group. It means nothing beyond the fact that you're okay with censorship and you're supporting it, but it doesn't actually help anyone in the real world.
It's usually just condescending anyway, and like represents maybe a fraction of a population's views, but I feel like a lot of groups just get like lumped together. It's like, hey, we don't all think the same. Like, some of us think this, some think that. We see that. I feel like we saw it here with the like all different sorts of Native American symbolism and mascots and things like that, where it's like they take polls, like 95% are actually not only okay with a certain mascot but like it because it like celebrates it, and then some are more racist, like some more caricature-y ones that are offensive. But it's not just like wipe out all things that are, it actually ends up hurting the people that you want to help, or they say they help, take away all Native American names or something, and then it's like, well, now you're just erasing us, which you already did that once. Like, now you don't have to symbolically do it.
It's sort of like the Land of Lakes thing where they took the Native American off of it, and the jokes were just amazing. They got rid of the Indian and they kept the land.
There's another example of this. A friend of mine just went to Disneyland recently, and the Jungle Cruise ride has been wokeified. So they got rid of like the African native animatronics, and then they replaced them with white characters. And so it's just kind of like how is this better? Like, you got rid of the black characters and you replaced with white characters. Like, but that's woke. Like, it's such a weird thing.
Yeah, and actually the new one, the pirates start a charity for the people that they're pillaging instead of raping them.
Well, they did have a problem with the prostitution in the Pirates ride. I remember that they were complaining about it, and I was like, wait, is that something that didn't happen?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's also very tongue in cheek. Like, I don't think anybody went on that ride leaving and then went and go, I think selling women, I think that's actually a good thing. I think like nobody does that.
Forcing women into skin slavery is what I want to dedicate my life to. I was on there. I don't remember that. I was on that ride as a kid. I remember pirates because they're fun. I don't remember any of that other stuff. It's for like 45-year-old MSNBC wine moms to bitch about in the Facebook groups.
I do remember one of the pirates chasing one of the prostitutes, but it looked like she had a smile on her face because it was like a sex game essentially. But I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I wasn't like upset by it as a woman. That didn't bother me, and it never has.
It's very cartoony. It's very, like he's chasing her like around like a pillar or something. It came off as like a Looney Tunes gag rather than like anything else. Like that's the thing. That's the big problem that women are facing these days, being chased by pirates.
Yeah, only in Somalia.
But getting back to the literary thing, funnily enough, I just watched a video essay. I think it was by Nerd Writer. But it was about.
Hold on, sorry. I thought I heard a cat, and I wasn't sure if it was one of mine. I was like, I hear a cat.
Missy's in everything I do. She can't help herself.
Oh, she's sweet.
I just watched this video essay, and it was about how like the controversies around the Harry Potter books, and how basically like they're one of the most banned books or book series in America, and for like the stupidest reasons. But it's funny because I mean it's. Most of the censorship, it didn't even touch on like the anti-J.K. Rowling thing or any of the trans stuff. It was just coming from like the religious right and how they believe that the book was, and how the
like sorcery
was.
It was an anti-witchcraft, Satanism thing.
Yeah. So are they being censored for another reason now, or is it still the religious right?
Now it's because J.K. Rowling is supposedly anti-trans.
Right. Okay, so exactly. That's what I thought. Because I was like, so Harry Potter, I mean, I'm going to say it can't win. It's one of the most popular books of all time. But like now it's getting it from both sides. Because when I was growing up, that was the big thing. And that was like the good old days when the right wing censored everything. And like it seemed like the left stood for free speech. And now it's the total opposite. I feel like there's still a faction of the religious right. You saw a little of it come out during the Lil Nas X video when he gets a lap dance to Satan. But then he kills Satan at the end. So I mean, what's better than that for the religious right? But you saw a little bit come out there. I was like, oh my god, it's like 1996 again. Like this feels good. But now it's the left wing is now censoring Harry Potter. And I'm here for it.
They have way more control though than the right has in recent memory. Like in my lifetime, the right has never had the kind of cultural power that the left does now to censor. So to me, it feels
maybe the 80s. I was like the 80s was the last time the right had a foothold on culture, like not just politics but culture. And now it's not even close. And Joe and I talk about this pretty often on the podcast. And I did want to get into because we lean in. I mean, we lay in heavy to the left wing on censorship a lot here, but there is right wing censorship. But we always come back to the point that you just made, Alex, is that. Yeah, but the right doesn't control culture, like not even close. The left wing controls Hollywood and education and
the media.
The media and
they control the publishing world entirely.
And, oh my God, the publishing world. I probably comment on. I'm surprised they haven't blocked me yet on Publishers Weekly because every other every other tweet they make, I'm just like making some comment because every other tweet they do is woke, is something woke.
Yeah.
And so I'm surprised. Good for them for not blocking me yet, but I know it's
eventually. Well, and that's the thing too, though, is that I've had people say to me, but there's so many anti-woke nonfiction books getting published, and I'm like, that's nonfiction.
That's the real world. That's the real world. And so Alex, I'm also a fiction writer. I published 4 novels. I actually just came out with a short story today. A lot of different short stories, and then I do some nonfiction things. But do you have a certain area that you typically write in, or are you just all over the place?
When it comes to fiction, I'm a magical realist writer.
Okay.
Almost entirely. I have written some romance novels and dabbled in that just because it's fun. It's like, it's not as serious. It's not as intense as writing something like magic realism, which is more literary. And I feel like I, at this point, would have a higher chance of success as a romance novelist than I would as a traditional literary novelist because of the way
Yeah.
the publishing world works right now.
Do you have any kind of insider? So I don't traditionally publish when I don't have the patience for it. I want to publish exactly what I want to publish. Obviously, that doesn't mean I have 2 editors. I go through the editing process and I hear their advice. For grammar, they control everything. But I mean, for my story and my voice and my message, I want to put out there exactly what I put out there. I actually had a short story accepted into not like a huge publication, a Canadian one, but something that I would be proud of to put in my bio or whatever. And they wanted me to change too much of it, and I said no, I'll pull it then. Like I don't, and not in like a woke way at all, but in just well, this is why I want you to. And I'm like, that would completely change the satire, like the satirical tone of the story. So no, that's not what I want. I'm like, I don't care. I don't know if they're paying me like $100 or something. I'm like, no, I'd rather put the story out there that I want to put out there. So my question is, as someone who does traditionally publish more, do you have any insight on the craziness that goes on in the publishing world?
Well, a lot of it has to do with who you know. So like
The gatekeepers.
Yes, there's a lot of gatekeeping involved. I've met a huge amount of authors, many of them debut, many of them around my age, because I was for so long after grad school so starry-eyed about it that I like got involved, like really involved, and it wore me down because I noticed these trends. None of them were straight white males unless they were already established years ago. So like Terry Brooks, who is an awesome human being, by the way. I did meet him. He was probably one of the best authors that I met for how he talked to people. But then I met so many debut authors, and they were all of them pushing this ideology. They were all woke. They all went to grad school, every single one of them, like me. But they knew someone. They all knew someone, and that's how they got their
privilege. But of course,
Yeah.
they wouldn't admit to that. Yeah.
No. Well, I mean, and if you think about it, the woke ideology is what got them into these prestigious schools in the first place, because that's what's great to the school, to have this diversity. And then publishing one author who I actually like most of these authors, I don't have anything against them as people, and because they've all, when I met them, they all seem like very reasonable people, but they were all like kind of a product of how the system is working. So one of them said that he was trying to get his novel published, and a lot of publishers told him that they wanted him to rewrite it as an immigrant story.
It seems like, when was this? How long ago was this?
This was 2019.
Okay.
Wow. Because that actually, well, you can keep going, but that does surprise me. That either that means, wait, so write as an immigrant story, but like still not as like an anonymous or under a pen name, right? Like still the same.
Yeah.
That seems like the opposite of what now is acceptable, because now you have to only write your truth, even if it's fiction.
Yeah, that's true. And that's one of my problems with writing today. I read most of these debut novels, and they're all incredibly boring. And it's like, I hate to say it because I like these people, but for the most part, the novels are not good. And that's the worst tragedy of it all, is that they're not good, and they lack plot. I know in that first chapter, you should know what you're waiting for. Right. And there's none of that. So by the time I get to the end of the novel, I'm kind of like, I'm like, why did I waste my time with this? I feel like I got nothing out of this.
What are the trends that you're seeing in these debut novels that are like, besides no plot?
Well, and immigrant stories are incredibly popular. That's a huge one. Sure. Girls coming of age stories. Which I find very annoying. And someone had said to me, a straight white man had said to me that he was like, I love these stories because I was not a young girl. And I'm like, I was. Why do you think I want to read this like 1,000 times? I've experienced it. I've lived it. I don't need to read about it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the problem with that. It's like, I don't actually, like, as someone who writes, I and people talk about this whole representation thing, seeing yourself in this stuff. And I'm like, I don't need them to have gone through the exact same experience as me for me to see myself in the novel, you know, to connect to it. That's not like immigrant stories. A lot of them have the theme, this is the exact same thing, that it's hard to communicate. Now I get that. I have never been outside of the US. But I have a learning disability, and sometimes it was a struggle for me growing up really to communicate with people. So to me, that is something I can connect to, and it has nothing to do with my demographic, you know, racially or from what nation. Right. And I think a lot of people pretend as if you have to see everything of yourself in a medium to really enjoy it. And it's like, that's not true at all, or to connect to it. And it's like, that's stupid. I have so many male characters that I've connected to in the past, gay characters, whatever, you know, take your pick of something that's not me that I could connect to, but they are acting as if that's impossible now. And I'm like, isn't that the point of writing? Right.
No, I completely agree, and Ben and I have talked about this in other contexts as well. But one of the things that I've always admired about really good storytelling, whether it's in a novel or a TV show or a movie or even a video game, even, but like where you have like the main character, even if the main character is of a completely different gender, sexuality, race, different time period, that's completely different from you as the reader. But if the original author is willing to be like, okay, but I'm going to dig deeper. I'm going to find something universal about this character, where it's like anybody can read it at any time period and be like, oh, you know, I actually relate to this. I can read this and something about it still resonates with me. I think that's a sign of an author who's put in the work to dig deep into like what the human condition is, and not just be like, oh, well, I'm a gay man, so I'm going to write the story that's only for gay men. And if people don't, and I want people who aren't gay men to understand how difficult it is to be a gay man. It's like, no, I also think that writing in a more universal sense, like that helps break down the barriers. That helps other people who are not you understand you better. Like, oh, and even though you might have a different race than me, you know, we actually have similar experiences here.
It's almost like, so bear with me on this comparison. So like there used to be this concept in economics called like mercantilism. And it was basically like there's a big pie out there of all of the resources and money and trade and all of that. And it's like, this was kind of the 1600s, 1700s. We're like, well, if the Dutch owned this much, then the English couldn't control this much, and the French could. So basically, it was like, well, that's why they always were fighting each other and all of that. And that's really not the case. Like resources and money, I think, goes up and down, and the pie can get bigger. Like, and that's kind of what I'm feeling like is going on with culture now, where it's like, well, if you're a straight white man and you write a story about a gay Black woman, then you took that story away from the next gay Black woman. They're like, no, she can write that story too. And there can be two stories. And maybe the one by the actual gay Black woman is authentic. And then that will resonate better with the readers. That's fine. Like no one's saying that you're free of criticism, for instance. But the fact that you're taking away the piece of the pie from fiction, it just doesn't make sense. It's not grounded in reality. For instance, I wrote my first novel. I had one character. I had one character who's like a young straight white guy, kind of the same age I was when I was writing it, or a little younger. And then I had an Algerian Muslim character. And I did research and I wrote about it. And if an Algerian Muslim reads that and says, well, this isn't authentic, this would never happen, well, that's on me, and that's fine. You can criticize it for that. But just because I wrote it doesn't make it wrong. And that's the problem. It's all about the superficial diversity or lack thereof. Like you said, Alex, like, oh, they want all diversity. You know, they want the most superficial diversity of skin color and gender and religion, not diversity of substance. They need everything to sound the same, because the second you get one of these quote unquote diverse people saying something or writing something heterodox, or, you know, that goes against the orthodoxy, well, then there are Larry Elder, the blackface of white supremacy, which was actually a headline in the Los Angeles Times. Which, how is that not the most offensive thing you could possibly say about them? But yeah, it's okay, because he doesn't fall under the proper diversity. He's the wrong type of diversity.
Yep.
And
Diversity of thought is what is not desired.
exactly,
And
which is true diversity.
yes,
Right.
that is true diversity. It also is true tolerance and acceptance, because of the fact that if you assume based on someone's, demographics, what they're thinking, that's not acceptance. That's not
Yes.
tolerance.
That's fucking racism.
Yeah.
That's like racism.
It's bigoted.
When Joe Biden says, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black, and he
Yeah.
said ain't, how is that not the most like racist shit you
Right.
could ever say? But yet it's okay. Yeah, you got a little criticism for that, but like, how is that acceptable?
Yeah. Well,
Watch is a D next to his name. But that,
yeah. But it's one of those things where it's unbelievably racist, where it's like your skin color determines your thoughts. And it's like, isn't that the fundamental racist idea, that your skin color is the thing that determines your character? Like, but you hear this all the time in major companies of like, well, we want to bring in more people of color because we want a black perspective, we want a Hispanic perspective. It's like, yeah, but there's not one. It's like there's one singular perspective that dominates every race.
You know what the perspective should be? The perspective should be, if you're in a company, making money. That's what the company is.
Yes.
If it's a nonprofit, it's helping the client or the charity or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or if you're a university, it's educating the students. Like that's the what you're looking for. That's the perspective or those things.
Right.
Because they should all align. Yeah.
I mean, it is when you convert a system or an idea to push an ideology over what it's actually supposed to be doing, you're setting it up for failure. The problem is when everything does that. So then you have this, monolithic monopoly kind of idea where like every academy, every nonprofit and every entertainment organization has converted from producing what they're supposed to produce to producing propaganda and pushing ideology. And essentially right now the traditional publishing world, especially for literary novels, has converted. They converted at least 2 decades ago, I'd say. I think they were one of the first to fall, actually.
Well, and I know I brought this up last episode. I think the best example of this, Alex, I don't know if you're familiar with the situation where there was a white, I'm assuming straight male author of poetry, and I forget his name. I should know, but I forget his name. But he was publishing poems, or trying to publish poems, or get them into magazines or prize or whatever it was, and just kind of getting rejected. And then all he did was change his name to something like overtly Chinese, like very obviously Chinese. Didn't change a word of any of the poems, not a word of substance. Immediately started getting accepted. That's all that changed, was the name. And that just shows that it's not about the content of the substance of the work. It's just about the identity of the author, which is like, that would offend me if I was the group you're trying to help, because it's like, well, you're not actually publishing this on my work. You're publishing it on my name or my picture or whatever that is. But anyway, what were we gonna say? I was
like, so my first name is Alex. It's not actually Alexandra or Alexis or anything like that. It's Alex. So and this has happened to me frequently, when I send in work and if they do it blind and then they accept me and then they assume I'm a man until they contact me. And then like this happens to me on the internet, even when my face is there, where people think I'm a man until I tell them otherwise. And it has totally shown me that people are incredibly sexist against men. And part of me does wonder, are these people, when they look at my name and they see my name is Alex, are they assuming? Because a lot of people do assume already that I am a man, and it's obvious that I'm a white person with my last name Miceli. So it's like, is that what it is? Like, I don't know. Should I start publishing under my middle name, which is more feminine?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, probably if it was just about getting published. But so Al, do you mind sharing, or do you live in California?
No, I live in Arizona.
Oh, you live in Arizona. Okay. Because I was going to say, California, really the West Coast, just has this kind of a different kind of progressivism that I'm in a blue state, I'm in New Jersey, a very blue state, but like it's not the same here. It feels like I don't know. Arizona's though kind of a mix. It's traditionally very red, but I know has kind of flipped somewhat on the national scale. What's the culture like there?
So I live in Phoenix, which is
Sure.
the biggest populous center
Yeah.
in the entire state, and it is blue.
Yeah.
It wasn't before I left for college. It was
Okay.
sort of a mix. It was more purple, which I didn't mind. I felt like that was actually kind of nice. I like
Sure.
a more balanced environment because I'm not a Republican or a Democrat.
Neither
But now I live in Maricopa County, which is one of the places that use Dominion voting. Or, you know, that if you want to edit that to say something like the voting system that people are questioning. But so for me, I noticed, so I was involved in a lot of artsy stuff here before everything got locked down. And I was starting to get more and more upset with how it worked and how people were so intense about certain subjects and just mean. And because I've always been kind of in the center, that I was like, why are you acting like the other side is essentially evil? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Like, you really honestly think like 50% of the population is evil, that your neighbors
Sure.
are evil? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
And I noticed it in the writing, and I noticed it in the so-called art and the way people talked about it. And it was funny too, because there were a lot of people who were like actually Mexican who were like a lot nicer about it, and some of them were like, well, maybe like when the American Dirt thing happened.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
Yeah, Jeannie
Yeah.
Cummins, yeah.
Yeah, one of them said, well, maybe there are no good Mexican immigrant novels. And that was a Mexican guy who said that to me. And I was like, I like Bless Me Ultima, but okay. But I mean, so to me, it was kind of weird because it's almost entirely the yuppies, the white yuppies who are like this. And a lot of them are from California. People have been moving to Phoenix from California for as long as I've been alive, because it's cheaper here.
Yeah.
And like for the longest time, realty was our #1 industry because we have so much land that you could just keep expanding and expanding. So people would come here from California and buy land, and I think that's why it turned blue in Maricopa. The rest of the state is red.
Oh yeah.
And so like a lot of our representatives are actually red, like in the state representatives, and I honestly want to leave. I want to leave Phoenix because they're so blue and they're so echo chambered.
Yeah. So have you noticed like, because when you said half the country is evil, and I always like to bring up, so it was from 2008 through to 2016 we were not racist because we voted for Obama, and 2016 we were racist, and now we're not again. But if I think it came out today that there's leaked that Trump is very much going to run for president again 2024. So we're going to probably be racist again if I'm keeping track of it. I just want to know, are we a racist country or are we not a racist country? And I honestly don't know.
Well, and a lot of this, like I did a lot of political study just to see what was going on and everything, especially when it came down to why the 26th election was the way it was. And I found that like a lot of this goes back even to the 70s, this idea that saying the other side's evil, and this is very specific to the left saying this of the right, morally evil, that they hate people, that they want them to die, just to essentially make us a one-party country. And it's hilarious because now I'm reading another book and it talks about Texas succeeding, and one of the things they talk about is that when Bush won, Bush W, California talked about exiting the United States, and that was like a reasonable idea, but it's never a reasonable idea for a red state to leave.
Oh yeah, there are tweets of Nancy Pelosi saying that the election was stolen in 2016, right? Like, so there's always a double-edged sword and a double standard for these issues. But so have you? Does Phoenix have a big? Most cities do now, like a big art scene.
It does.
Yeah. Has the identity politics like crept into that too? Where like in San Francisco, for instance, the curator, I think it was the head curator of the San Francisco Museum of Art or something like one of the big ones. Joe, yeah, do you know what I'm talking about?
I wrote an article about it. Yeah.
He like jokingly said, "Don't worry, we're not getting rid of all the white art," as in saying we're bringing in lots of non-white art, but we're not. And he got fired. Like he had to leave.
He had to resign. He had to resign.
Yeah, he had to resign under
yeah.
like yes, resign under pressure is being fired. Like it's the same thing.
That is.
Right?
Yeah.
Like so by saying, "Don't worry, we're not getting rid of all the white, art, not white art by white people."
Yeah.
And he had to resign. Like, have you seen that in the Phoenix area? That kind of craziness.
Pride happened. They didn't want any police officers there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, I know that happened in New York. I didn't realize that happened.
Well, like they said they wanted them there, but out of uniform, and it was like, then they have no authority to do anything. Like you just want private security, hire private security.
Like, as usual. Yes.
And I was part of a book club at a major bookstore here that is very into debut authors and indie art and all this stuff. They have art on the walls by local artists and stuff for sale. And I like, it wore me down. Like in January of 2021, this year, I was like, if I have to keep doing this, if I keep going to this book club, I'm going to shoot myself. I hate this so much. This is making me hate fiction. And part of the reason why is that it was mostly women in their 40s and 50s, white.
Wine moms.
and very liberal. And they kept reading all these books. It's kind of like actually in the past how like they would have Black artists perform for entirely white audiences, and they would pat themselves on the back about how like progressive they were or how liberal they were.
Right.
And then
culture.
if that Black artist moves into their neighborhood, they're NIMBY and calling the police when he's moving his stuff in.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it was starting to feel. And actually what happened is that the woman who ran the book club, who is a book reviewer for a newspaper, wrote an article about how we're using the word Orwellian wrong. And I was like, and I liked her. We were close. Close for me. I don't get close to people very often. But
except for us.
What?
Except for us.
Yeah.
We're best friends now.
Yes, we are.
Yeah,
but so I
Dear
was
friend.
like, I was so shocked and just upset that I was like, this is just propaganda. This is just.
Do you remember her definition of Orwellian? Like how we're supposed to use it?
She brought in an expert, expert on Orwell. Oh my God, the fucking bullshit.
Excellent.
See, that's the thing. Back in college, I think I was 20, I think. I read this thing about Ansel Adams, where someone found some Ansel Adams negatives in a garage sale. And he was like, I have Ansel Adams work. And it's never been seen before. I can sell it and make money. And the Ansel Adams Foundation said, no, that's not really Ansel Adams. So then they go to court over it, and they both bring an expert to say whether or not it's Ansel Adams, and of course their experts are saying opposite things. And I was like, experts just say whatever the person who hired them want them.
Clients paying them for you.
Right.
So to me, the word expert means essentially nothing.
Right.
This is a highly educated person whose opinion is for sale. So when and then also bringing in one expert when you're talking about like something that's up for debate, and you supposedly want to get the debate out there, is such bullshit to act like, oh yeah, we're doing our job, you know, to bring this to the forefront. And it's like, no, you're not. You're absolutely not.
Hey guys, so real quick,
wait, why did this happen? This didn't happen last time.
The stupid Zoom thing?
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I don't know why. So in a few minutes it's gonna kick us off and then we'll have to redo it again. We'll have to jump back.
Why don't we just end it now then, so we're not like the middle of a sentence?
Yeah, let's just do that, and then
Right.
there'll be a few more minutes because then it also has to convert to a video, so it'll be like another 5 minutes or so. So sorry, I don't know why there's this stupid group chat thing that has a stupid time limit. But yeah, we will continue this conversation in just a few minutes. Go. Okay, all right, and we're back.
All right, and we're back.
So actually, all this talk of like representation and like seeing yourself in a story reminds me of something I just saw today. Where the hell is? Oh yeah, here we are. So this is from an article in the Sydney Morning Herald.
Is that Sydney, Australia?
I'm assuming.
Oh my, Joe.
Yeah.
No Australian shit on the podcast. I told you. I openly discriminate against Australians. But fine, go ahead.
Come on, it's my birthday.
I'm sorry. You're Australian and your Australian heritage. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I guess there's a show called Normal People, and I guess it's based on something.
Normal People?
Yeah.
I read the novel for that book club. And
Sally Rooney?
Yep. And
Yep.
I read
Full
and I
circle.
watched the TV show and I actually reviewed it on my channel.
Okay.
Both of them.
Did you enjoy it? Did you like it?
No.
No? Okay.
Good. You're gonna love this.
So the reason I bring it up is because this article in the Sydney Morning Herald is the article is called "Surely there are better literary heroes for our generation than Sally Rooney." So Sally Rooney is the author of the original novel, and here's an excerpt from it that someone this is the New Liberals posted on their Twitter feed. Normal People is about two white, able-bodied, beautiful, straight people mulling about how hard it is to be straight, white, able-bodied, and straight. But it's like, what kind of a loser reads a book or watches a show or a movie and goes, I don't like this story because it's about it's because of their skin color, or
She's Irish.
Yeah.
And it's about Irish people.
Why aren't there more indigenous to North America people in this Irish story?
Yeah.
And also, okay, to be fair, the novel is mostly about power dynamics, and it actually does a good job with this, where it talks about the shifting power dynamics between the fact that he's poor, she's rich, but she's a girl, and he's a guy, and then she's from a home with abuse, and he has a loving mother, but he doesn't have a father, and so it's kind of like that. I feel like Sally Rooney does a really good job with like shifting it back and forth, like the idea that in certain situations she's doing better and others he's doing better. They're both very intelligent people, and they keep dancing around each other. They have this will they won't they bullshit going on. But there is a couple of problems with that novel, but I wouldn't say it's because they're straight white beautiful people at all. That to me, that's not the issue with it. Like, for one thing, I don't know what I'm waiting for in that novel. By the time you reach the end, you're like, this novel could go on longer, or it could end earlier. Like, there's no real ending to it, which that's a problem with craft. And the other thing I had a problem with is that it presents this idea, and this is going to sound really weird, that BDSM is sexist and misogynistic. That it's all about women getting victimized by men because they were victimized as children by men. And it's like, well, first of all, the fact that dominatrix exist completely throws that out. Yeah. And secondly, why do you care?
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you heard of that book, 50 Shades of Grey?
Yeah.
It's kind of popular, kind of single-handedly saved Barnes & Noble like 8-9 years ago. Yeah, I don't know.
They say
There
that
might be
book's
different-
sexist too.
Yeah, then we have a lot of sexists in the world because that book was really popular.
Yeah.
I don't know. I agree, and this just fucking filters into everything. So, much to my chagrin, I watched the CNN, which is complete garbage. They did put out some good like documentary series a few years ago that I enjoyed. There's one about like the 60s and 70s and it like basically the decades going up to the modern day that seemed fairly like balanced. Like I almost kind of forgot it was CNN, but these came out a while ago. I'm being serious. Yeah. And then they came out another one about movies. The movie, and I'm a huge movie fan. Joe and I talk about this. Like I write little reviews about movies. I watch multiple movies a week. So I like that too. But now they just came out with one about sitcoms. And because it just came out, this is like past the Great Awakening. And you can see that they just dismiss extremely popular shows. So I'm a big fan. I know it's kind of corny, but I really like How I Met Your Mother. It makes me happy. I enjoy it.
It's nice.
It's not the best show, but I like it. They talk about it for like 5 seconds being like, well, it's again just about a bunch of straight white people in the city. And they really missed the mark here. They could have done more with it. And then done that show like 13 fucking seasons, like 25 episodes each, extremely popular. And that's all you're going to say about it? Oh, because there are no groups of straight white friends in cities. That doesn't exist anymore.
About diversity when it comes to How I Met Your Mother. This is something that I picked up on that I loved. Robin is child-free. There aren't a lot of child-free characters on TV. So and as a child-free woman, I was like,
and she's career-centric. And she's career-centric. That's a huge part of the show, is that she gives up love multiple times because it would burden her her reporting career or anchor career or whatever it is. Yes, there's a lot of, it's just the fact, my point isn't to necessarily defend How I Met Your Mother because I don't need to. It's the fact that they make this whole show about sitcoms. That's all I have to say about it. Because, you know, it doesn't fit and also it's a representation. Barney, who is a womanizer in the show, is a gay man. Neil Patrick Harris is a gay man and he plays a straight guy. And that's great. And he's fantastic as it.
He is very good as Barney. I mean, it's a kind of a breakout role. Like he was always Doogie Howser and then suddenly it's like he's Barney to everybody now. And that's actually a good thing.
Besides Doogie Howser, like he played himself in Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, like as a cameo thing where he's like a big jerk, you know, that always plays over real well when characters play themselves or actors play themselves and then they go against their reputation, like Michael Cera in This Is the End, where he's like a huge asshole, and Michael Cera is the reputation of, you know, Michael Cera.
There's one on HBO, I can't remember the name of the show, where Daniel Radcliffe did that, where he acted like a huge like womanizer constantly. And and it was like it was obviously a joke.
But a note on representation, I think people honestly forget what that term means. And when you really, like, for instance, in Congress, God forbid I never talk about Congress again on the show, but in Congress, representation literally means the person is representing to the best of their ability what their constituents want, whether it's 51% or 99%, and it represents a relative number of a population. That's why a state like Wyoming only has one congressman or congresswoman, and California has however many, because they're representing maybe 400 some thousand. I forget what the number is, but it's something like that. We're talking about culture and movies and art and music. I can't think of any. Maybe the NBA is the only place that has more representation, for instance, for Black people, where it's like they represent 13% of the population. You think that they don't make up 13% of actors and actors, like in movies and like watch TV? It's way more than they actually represent. So the last, maybe CEOs and entrepreneurs and stuff, there's not representation there, whatever. That's a whole economic issue. But you're talking about music and culture. I can't think of a place more outside an area of culture where certain populations make up a more outsized role, like the LGBT population and arts and theater especially. They make up approximately maybe 5 to 10% of the population. I think that's being generous, and they're half of the theater world, if not more. So it's just like, I think people forget what representation actually means. Like indigenous people make up like a fraction of a percent. they aren't, if we did actual representation for them, we wouldn't see them.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so they actually get more representation and that, I think that's good. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it gets so ridiculous. Like, look at Oscar nominations. You think that minorities aren't making up their literal representation of these categories? That's absurd. That's just not true. So I think we just have to change, and that's a good way you can argue back with them. Like, look at, next time it's Oscar so white. Well, actually, they make up a huge percentage of these categories.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, and it's a weird standard that they want, where if they do want the arts and pop culture to reflect the demographics of, say, like the U.S., like you said, blacks make up like around 12.5 or 13% of the U.S. population. Does that mean that they want the cutoff of black representation in pop culture to be 13%? Where it's like, okay, but it's like, so well, who cares?
Yeah.
As long as it's like, I wouldn't even care if it's 50 or 80% or whatever, or however much, but it's like, as long as it's good, music and film and TV shows. Like,
that's what I
Well,
always
it's sort
say.
of like, if you look at how feminists view academia, right now academia is almost entirely dominated by women.
Right.
Men make up the most dropouts. They make up
and 79% or something like that, or
yeah.
But you see, the statistic came out yesterday where it's actually going to be overwhelmingly the largest group to drop out and to not go into college now is white men.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, and it's been more female for years.
Yeah.
And now it's becoming more, non-white and female. And so where's going to be the white male representation? And no one's gonna give a shit. And that's
right.
No. That's the thing, is that they only care about representation for these special groups. And yes. I have a serious problem with that. And it's like, and like a lot of people are like, well, why do you care, Alex? You're not a man, you don't have sons or whatever. And it's like, because they're people, and there's a problem with the world when a huge chunk, I'm sorry, that's a huge chunk of the population is so disenfranchised that are not, that have this avenue that they feel is closed to them, that they're dropping out and not going to college. You guys constantly talk about college as the avenue to success, to a good life, and you're basically saying we don't need them to have that. Now, I don't actually agree with the idea that college is the only avenue to a good life, and in fact can be an avenue to a bad one.
Yep.
Having taught college. But my problem is that they act as though I shouldn't care, and it's like, you want me to care about people who have nothing to do with me already, so why can't I choose those people?
Right.
I just think all these issues, it's always I'm of the belief that the what's usually framed in race and gender and all these things is all BS and pretext for class. I truly believe, I think that these institutions, they want to stay elite, right? Because that's what, in one of the big affirmative action cases, I forget which, if it was a law school or the undergrad, but it was the University of Michigan for both cases. Scalia came out and said a while ago, he said, if you really wanted to diversify for, not tokenize people, because they're always like, the handful, but if you really want to do that, you could easily do that. You could just put in however many, you could just accept people based on their race, but you don't want to do that because you want to stay elite. You want, and that's not adding up. Like, that's not keeping you elite if you did that. So now you're trying to to skirt around that. And I think that these institutions, if they don't give a shit about, actually having diverse class perspectives, they want the wealthy diversity, and not, they don't want white people from Appalachia, and they don't want, the poor Latinos from Miami or whatever. They want the wealthier ones because it's going to keep their institutions elite. Because if they start letting in anyone, then they're going to lose their panache, right? Their cachet, whatever it is. Right. So I think all these issues are always just, and that's why institutions and corporations, they love it. They love diversity trainings because they actually don't have to change anything.
No.
They just have to put up some banners and send some old white guys to diversity training, and they actually don't have to make any change to actually help people who
There's no-
have less than them. Yeah.
There's no charity involved. There's no actual action involved. It's all about just aping this idea, this ideology. If we say the right things, it's like during Pride Month when every single company comes out with their rainbow logos that they put on their social media.
Yeah. Well, not the ones though for Saudi Arabia, remember, or the ones for Nigeria, just the ones for Western Europe and North America and Australia, right? God forbid, because we can't offend them. When you start you tolerate the intolerant.
It's sort of like how Disney refuses to really showcase Black people in their movies when they market them in China.
Yeah. Yeah. The Chinese really don't like Black people.
No,
they don't. I remember I had a professor who spent, I think he lived in Taiwan. He had a Taiwanese wife, I believe, a white Mormon actually. I think he was on mission maybe, and he spent a lot of time in Korea and at the demilitarized zone at the 45th parallel. The North Koreans actually requested that the American because there's soldiers there, both South Korean and American, said we don't want Black soldiers there.
Oh shit!
Like do not put Black soldiers there. I don't know what would happen if they did, but like they were requesting stuff like that.
Jeez.
At the beginning of the lockdowns in China, Black people were being chased from their homes and their hotels.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Some leaders of African nations were calling them out for it. No, we didn't hear about it here.
We didn't hear about it. I never heard about that. Yeah.
So, but that is what happened. And because they blame them what were they, unclean or something? That bullshit racist old idea.
Yeah.
And it's like, you care so much about money when it comes to China as a company, but you don't, but in the US, they'll trade off money, making money as a company, as long as they can sell in these other nations that don't have this culture war.
That's insane. It reminds me so much, and I hate using Nazi comparisons.
Do I have to get the jar?
I get the jar.
Hold on, I'll get the jar. Hold on. Hold that thought.
All right.
Hold that thought.
Yeah, looks like.
Right.
Okay, it's my birthday though. It's my birthday.
Last week. Let me get my headset on. We introduced it last week, and we have started the Hitler, Nazi, and Holocaust jar that you have to put. So I actually have an IOU in there right now. If you make references to that are not like historic, but like actual references to any of those topics, or I should probably add fascism to it, which I think that's why I had to put money in it last week.
Yeah.
Last episode. But go ahead, Joe. I'll put an IOU for you in here.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Okay, cool. But during like the late 1930s, before the U.S. got into World War II, they did like Hollywood was so afraid of pissing off Hitler. I mean, it was insane. And Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator was one of the first major Hollywood films to make fun of Hitler.
Brilliant film.
Yeah, I know. It's such a great film.
Okay, so this is actually a historical point. So this wouldn't go in the jar. Okay. I dropped the gun.
All right, cool.
My bad.
Cool, I get to save that dollar. But yeah, I mean, it's insane that so many companies don't have the guts to say, we don't like you guys, so fuck you. We're gonna do what we want. I understand, the monetary reasons for it, but I mean, Jesus Christ, grow a fucking backbone. And especially when you have like Disney shooting Mulan in a part of China, or at least with the part of the Chinese government that's locking up the Uyghurs. Again,
it's just a little casual ethno-religious genocide. What's the big deal?
Well, they can get away with it because of cultural relativism. That's the thing, is that it's like us in the West, we can't get away with anything, not even like using the wrong word. Right. But any other nation that is not Western, white, they can get away with anything as long as they say cultural relativism. We can't judge them.
Yeah.
It's a catch. It's like, can't argue with that. It's a non sequitur, and it's well, even so, they can't. I think China's unique because they're so powerful. Like if a tiny nation was doing this, I do think it would be a little different, but even, you know, you have the fucking worst, like NBA, where the Houston Rockets owner, I believe, said something about basically free Hong Kong, which I tweet every single time I see LeBron James tweet. I respond that. And so it's just my little, you know, fight the power.
Yeah.
And then he had to kowtow to him, and LeBron James came out and said, you know, in support of the CCP. And then he's, you know, talking about Black Lives Matter. And so it's just all very hypocritical. But even the star of Mulan, I don't know the actress's name, but Mulan, she said something about that. And they, you know, they bring you in and they say, well, you're going to change your opinion about that or else.
They did that to John Cena too. He said,
Taiwan
oh my God, that was crazy. Yeah, Taiwan is a country. And they start speaking Chinese. I thought I thought it was dubbed or something. That was absolutely insane.
He has spoken Chinese in the past, so that's not necessarily like completely new.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
Yeah, but the whole apologizing to China to say that Taiwan is a country, it's like it's
so disturbing to me. And actually, so here's another good, because this kind of ties a lot of what we're talking together. So the disingenuous shithole YouTube and magazine, whatever, called, have you heard of Vox? I'm joking. So they, you know, they used to make, like a lot, like Vice, like a lot of these channels, they used to make like kind of legit, objective stories and cover things objectively, somewhat, you know, more or less. And so Vox a while ago put out a video about this exact issue, and it was really good. It was like probably 2016, about how China's taking over Hollywood. They're making their own Hollywood, how they only let in so many movies a year, and there's like different ways for American movies to get over there, and American movies all compete for it because they're, you know, they're cash cows, and how there are things in American movies that the three of us wouldn't even realize.
Oh, I realize. I talk about it on my channel back when I did movie reviews.
Like certain drinks that they drink, or certain like little thing. Okay. So
and then also always like China is pivotal to saving whatever's going on. That's
like there's that line. Yeah, there's that line. It's like, well, leave it to the Chinese or something, or like what's his name? Stanley Tucci's like drinking a certain drink that like they kind of zoom up on. It's like, we wouldn't really, but it's like for them anyway. Or you know, when and Top Gun, Tom Cruise had like take a patch off of his jacket because it was offensive to the Chinese for some reason. But anyway, so all of this. So basically, Vox puts out this video, and how the big one was a character. I should have my research on this better. A character was supposed to be a Tibetan monk, but was replaced with, who's that actress? She's white and I think Irish.
Oh, you're talking about Doctor Strange. Tilda Swinton.
Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strange.
Tilda Swinton.
Doctor Strange. Tilda Swinton. Right.
Yeah.
And they changed her from a Tibetan monk to a white lady, and to appease the Chinese. Right. So that's good. That's objective reporting. That's good. But then Vox, after the Great Awakening, comes out with a video about like whitewashing movies, and they use that exact example. And I comment on it, and I'm like, wait a minute, you guys put out a video 4 or 5 years ago saying why Tilda Swinton's playing this Tibetan character, or supposed to. She's not playing Tibetan in the movie, I don't think, right?
Yeah,
she's
supposed to be Irish.
Right, but who's supposed to be Tibetan? Like, you covered this. Not only did you not do research into this, you covered this, and now to fit the woke narrative, you've changed this. Like, that is so crazy to me. That the same company would use the same example and just completely change its meaning.
Well, it's kind of funny because like it's a kind of almost a joke at this point about The Guardian. You know, they put the picture of the writer on their articles. And it's always the same picture of the writer. But like, you can go through all their articles, you know, for one writer, and find one headline that contradicts a newer headline by the same author. Like, I can kind of get it in a publication that it's a different author, a different writer behind the article saying something that doesn't agree with the previous writer. But when it's the same writer, that's where it's like, oh my God, there's no excuse for this.
Yeah.
That reminds me a little bit of, I think Business Insider does something similar with I don't think the writers' images are displayed, but there was something where it was like somebody took screenshots of article titles from Business Insider, and they almost had the exact same format, the exact same topic, but just slightly different. And they're all from the same author, but it was like what Steve Jobs said at this college commencement thing is peak emotional intelligence. And then it was like a few years later, this is Elizabeth Holmes, her speech on this is peak emotional intelligence. And it was like, but it was all about emotional intelligence, but they just took a different CEO, tech CEO, or something like that. But it's like every single CEO apparently has lots of emotional intelligence.
Well, a lot of that has to do with hitting SEO.
Yes.
Like, I mean, a big chunk of that. Like I mean, Tim Pool talks about it, the idea that they noticed a skyrocket in clicks when they have words like racist and sexist and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And then Ryan Wan has that beautiful freaking piece where he's like, basically we have a subject, we have a problem, and we match them together, and that's how we get our articles. And he's like, he has like, hiking, and he's like, hiking is sexist, hiking is racist, and at the same time underneath him are actual headlines from that have been published that are what he's saying.
Do you remember that South Park episode years ago when it was about like drawing Muhammad, and then it was Family Guy and it was like the manatees or something just picking balls, and it was like, oh, that makes a Family Guy sketch. It was like Muhammad, salmon helmet, like door. It's like, remember that time when Muhammad brought a salmon helmet or something? Like that's what these are. But the balls are confined to like trans activism, racism, and like a few things, and then just everything else in the pot.
Somebody did a short YouTube sketch on that, and it was, I think it was called How Vice Writes Their Articles. And it was the exact same thing.
Vice?
It was like,
it actually depresses me, but go ahead.
Vice used to be pretty cool, but it was like
so cool.
Yeah.
What, didn't Tim Pool used to write for them? Wasn't
he started off.
He like, I'm sorry, Joe. You finish what you're saying, and then I'll give my Requiem Lacrimosa for Vice.
But it was like this very generic, like millennial author, and he's got long hair and it's in a man bun or whatever. And then, and so he's sitting at his desk, and then he's like, okay, like this is what my next article is gonna be. And so he picks up like one of those really large dildos with the suction cup, and he's got 3 like whiteboards, and one is just like ethnicity, and then types of bigotry, and then some kind of activity or something like that. So he gets the dildo and he throws it at each one, and then he's okay, got my new article, and it was like. It was like Mad Libs. It was, and this is a real article.
That's what it is, Mad Libs.
But it was like Colombian, transgender Colombians, and the drug trade or something like that. But it's Mad Libs. It's like refrigerator magnet poetry. Take different things, put them together, and like, okay, I'm checking off all the boxes.
Yeah, and it's like Vice. These are the guys who used to talk to ISIS, go to North Korea, go to like Belfast and talk about tensions between Catholics and Protestants and stuff. And now their articles are like Serial's racist. And it's like, what happened to you guys?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and then look at the gaming journalism. That is,
I saw that. So I was on your YouTube channel. I'm not a gamer. I used to be, like growing up and into college, but and I don't know, Joe, if you are, I'm not sure.
Not really.
All right. So do you want to enlighten us on the gaming world, or should I not, because it'll just depress me?
Well, gaming journalism has been a joke for a while, but like now they're constantly talk about things like, I put my vibrating console controller up my ass.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah, keep going.
And it's like, no, what? And then like game reviews are not game reviews. They don't tell you how the game plays. They tell you, and in fact, sometimes they're like, it's too much like a game, and it's like, it's a video game. I expect it to be like a game, not like one, actually one. And they were like, oh, this is problematic because of blah 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 blah. And they went after Cyberpunk 2077 hardcore, and one of the reasons why is because it's CD Projekt Red game, and they're not owned by any like Chinese company, and like if you follow the like ownership lines of a lot of like traditional games journalism companies, they're all owned in China essentially. So and some of them actually, if you follow it back down, own other developers and publishers. So they have a relationship, that's what Gamergate was actually about, was about wanting games journalism to be ethically sound, to be on the up and up. Like, you tell us what kind of relationship you already have with the developer. And then they said, oh no, it's racist, it's sexist. Mostly it's sexist. And
Sure.
When they do bring up Gamergate, they never once bring up the not your shield counter movement, which is a bunch of people like me, women, people of color, who are like, we are not your fucking shield for criticism.
Gotcha.
Like, if you are screwing up, that's on you. That has nothing to do with our demographics. And they totally erase that entire counter movement.
Right. I mean, wasn't Christina Hoff Sommers like a big part of the Gamergate thing?
One of the biggest names to come out of it is Anita Sarkeesian. Who says everything's racist, everything's sexist. And my point, and she's the one who really woke me up to this idea that these are grifters, because the idea that she chooses something that has absolutely nothing to do with anything quantifiable.
Yes, right.
Because if it's not quantifiable, then she can say it's a forever war and is forever important and forever paid.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you want to talk about something in games that actually needs to be fixed. How about gambling mechanics in video games that are hitting children? And nope, that's quantifiable, and that's a real issue. But she wants to be important to feminism, and God, she's so dumb.
She sucks.
Say it.
Anita Sarkeesian, yeah.
I honestly don't know if this has happened yet, but I could see it happening. Has the woke craziness gotten to the point where there's like avatar blackface? Like, if you can't have how you can like choose an avatar for games, you could be yourself, whatever you could be a wizard, a fairy, whatever it is. Like, are they like, well, if you're not this race, you can't have this race avatar?
It's the Space Buns issue.
What's that?
So some girl was playing Animal Crossing, and she was not black. She was white. Her character was white in the game, but she had these two buns on her head, but they were it was like Afro hair. So they called them Afro poofs, and she called them space buns. And they said, you shouldn't be able to have space buns if your character isn't black, and you can't call them space buns. And it was such a big deal that she got off Twitter. And it was huge, and it was ridiculous. It's like, this is Animal Crossing.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm an orc. Like,
That's the other thing. Like, in fantasy, they keep saying that orcs are coded racism, and it's
God damn it! Like,
and it's like, no, they're not. You're racist. If you look at orcs and see black people, you're the racist.
Yeah.
Right. I grew up. One of my favorite games of all time was Warcraft, and like the strategy game, not World of Warcraft, like the pre stuff before that. Yeah. And so the movie sucked, but I remember it sucked not because it was racist, like it sucked for other reasons. But I remember that being a thing. That's like, and that was pretty early in all of this craziness. I don't know when that came out, but it was probably mid 2010s. And I remember it's like, oh, Warcraft is really just about like white imperialism. I was like, it's not about knights and elves and shit. Like, what are you talking about?
Even if you were going to say that the orcs were coded black people, which the coded thing to me is always like, so you mean stereotypes? Okay, you're saying stereotypes. Just a fancy word for that.
Yeah.
But the problem with that interpretation is that the orcs came to the humans' land in that movie.
Yeah.
So it doesn't even work as a metaphor for white imperialism.
Right. Isn't that frustrating though? Where like completely apolitical things get politicized, like forms of pop culture and entertainment get politicized. I mean, did you guys hear about that knitting thing that happened a while back? God, that was ridiculous. And and Vox, of course, published an article about it. But again, it was like it was just people.
Vox is on it.
I know.
Vox is on the case. Better investigate.
But that's the thing, though. It's just like it's people hunting.
They keep saying that everything is political. All things are political. The personal is political or whatever. And if you don't care about politics, it's because you're privileged. And it's like, I know a lot of people who are very unprivileged who are like really scraping by and they don't give two shits about politics because of that.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not privilege.
Right.
Yeah. But then like, and that's why we have such bad like media. So like we have bad novels, we have bad video games from major publishers, we have bad movies from major studios, we have bad TV shows from major studios because they don't care about the craft behind it. All they care about is the message because everything's political to them, and it's like it's not.
I think there has to come, because I don't think it's working though. Like the numbers are down on lots of these properties and forms of entertainment, and media the biggest one, obviously. Very average podcasts do a lot better than shows on the major networks. It's just the numbers, and like eventually you'd have to think that they're gonna stop, or that they're like, I don't know, like
the thing is though, they think if they crush all the other indie sources, if they get rid of them all, then you have to watch their stuff. You have to consume their stuff. The problem is that's not true.
Well, that's what Joe and I started this podcast. Actually, a big part of that was to amplify indie artists and what we call dangerous artists, or people who are just doing their own thing. It doesn't matter. It could be very liberal, very conservative, or not political at all. Just doing their own thing and not giving into the gatekeepers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it looks like we only have a few minutes left here, but is there any last minute things that anyone want to bring up real quick?
Alex, do you, in 3 minutes, can you, in your own words, say why writers are the worst people in the world?
Yeah.
Well, writers who don't actually want to promote empathy in writing, but want to promote ideology and propaganda, and the publishers behind them that want to do the same thing, they are the worst people in the world. The writers who are still pushing for empathetic depictions of characters, regardless of the demographics of those characters, regardless of their own personal demographics, those people are awesome. And they do exist. They're out there, and it's worth taking the time to try to find them.
I say that as a writer. I don't associate with many writers, well, except for you, of course. But and I've actually changed that a little. I think writers are the second worst group. It's that journalists have taken over as the worst people in the world, and lawyers are a close third, which I also am, so I can say these things. Except for journalists. I'm not a journalist, and they are horrible.
I lump them in writers.
Don't do that. I wouldn't do that. don't do that.
Well, I do, when I talk about writers against woke ideology, I do talk about journalism a lot, because it's a specific kind of craft of writing, but it is still, there's a point to it. It's still a communication form, and you're trying to get a story out there. But the problem is when you're lying.
Right.
Then you're not a journalist at that point. You're a propagandist.
Yeah. All right, Alex. Thank you for joining us. And why don't you let our audience know where they can find you?
All right. I stream on my own channel, Alex Ball Trades, and I stream with my friend Caleb Beers on his channel, which is Caleb Beers, where we talk about nonfiction books a lot. And I'm not on Twitter because I got banned, but I am on Facebook.
We'll talk about that next time.
I am on Facebook as Alex Miceli, and a lot of other places. I have my own Discord channel, that kind of stuff, which you can find links to all of those on my YouTube channel.
Awesome. Right. Yeah, and we'll share the link. Yeah, we'll put those links in the YouTube description. And thank you for joining us, Ben. Stay reckless, man.
Stay reckless, Joe.
Yeah, and
stay reckless, Alex.
Yeah, Alex, stay reckless.
Stay reckless too.
I definitely.
All right, thanks everybody.